Welcome everyone to a new episode of PADA Spotlight. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Rungtep Geo. I'm the Membership Engagement Manager at PADA. And today we have partnered with our member Travel Consul for a webinar about global B2B travel and the impact of COVID-19. So today, the webinar will have a presentation by Travel Consul, and it is going to be followed by a small panel discussion after. Let me introduce you to our speakers and panelists of today. We're going to have Alan Elliott Mershon, who is the chair of Travel Consul and the partner at MMGI Global. We'll also have Sarah Anderson, who is the founder and managing director of GTI, as well as Reen Ho Wang, who is the founder and managing director of Brand Story Asia. The moderator today will be Paul Brunkan, our director for communications and external affairs, from whom you will hear later. So before we start the presentations, let me say a few words. If you have any questions for the speakers today, please submit them as usual in the Q&A box, which is at the bottom, should be at the bottom of your page. Please don't use the chat box for the Q&A because we will lose all the questions. So after the panel discussions, there will be some time for the speakers and panelists to answer questions that you might have. So feel free to submit your questions. And I think without further ado, so that we have time for everything, I would like to officially welcome Alan Elliott Mershon. Hello, Alan.
Hello, how are you? Good to see you.
So I will hand over to you and your presentation.
Thank you so much. And I'll start
Alan,
right off.
we cannot hear you at the moment.
Okay.
Sorry. Oh, I can hear you, Al.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Okay, great. All right, I'm going to share my screen and we'll get right started right away. Excellent. So thank you again for PADA and welcome to all the members. We're very excited about sharing this presentation with you today. This is the most recent research that we've done on the B2B market on a global basis. And then I'll get to hand it over to my two colleagues from both Australia and China, Sarah and Reen, to give you some more detail. Now, Travel Consul is a great group of 18 different agencies around the world, all specializing 100% in the travel marketing industry. We just finished in mid to late September, a survey with over 1,000 completed responses from people truly around the world, travel executives, tour operators, agency owners. This was done out of 20 source markets around the world using 11 different languages on a digital platform. It's the largest survey we've done to date, so we're very excited about the participation and the interest in this survey. This gives us a little idea of what type of company was involved. As you can see, about half were retail travel agents, so those really with their finger on the pulse. The biggest bulk after that was tour operators and wholesalers, so clearly demonstrating what we were seeing in the distribution channel. So that was 84% of the total. You also see we had a good group of Asians. 1 out of 4 of the responses were Asia. Good group from Australia, the rest Europeans, North America, and South America. So truly a global survey to give us a good feel of what's going on into the marketplace. As you could imagine, the current stage of COVID and how each country is dealing with it is completely different. 4 out of 10 respondents felt that their countries restarted cautiously. But that said, the epidemic is still on the rise. I happen to be in Los Angeles right now where we're rising way too fast. Restaurants are being closed and it looks like we might go back to beyond stay at home. It might be even more cautious and it might be a lockdown. where other countries are more free and more clear. And we'll hear more about that as time goes on. You can see it's all over, but even a third of the country's border remain closed to travel internationally. I know that's kind of the case in Thailand for the most part. It's in Australia, and we'll see that until hopefully some of the remedies come to us. We then dug a little deeper and said, what's the effect on your company? So we could get a good feel for what's happening in the industry. And you can see there's a really abrupt change on the way the relationship is between the companies and their employees. 1 out of 3 companies moved from full-time to part-time. And part-time could be as small as 5 hours. It could be associated different numbers, but you see a big dip in that. When you add how many have gone to independent contractors and how many had laid off, you're now seeing that it's a small portion of the industry that is actually still working even full-time, only about 16%. A little bit of rise there that gives us a little optimism, but overall it's still relatively low. And I can just see a little footnote in the US. We're estimating in the next couple of years, the majority of travel advisors will not be employees. They'll all be independent contractors, and most of them will be working from home. So it'll be a real shift in distribution sales and how companies approach that sales effort that might be much more marketing than sales altogether. So there's definitely an increase in there. When we talked about the confidence in the agencies for down the road, especially if there's no government intervention, and where there was some in certain places, that seems to be on the decline now. The overall synopsis is, if we can get through the next 6 months, we'll be able to make it. So there's a little more optimism for maybe 7 to 10 months down the road. And this was even before any word of vaccines. So it's going to be that big hump that we can get through. And then hopefully the agencies will be able to continue and do business. Now, unfortunately, the dollars were not going to be behind this. The estimated dollar down for the fourth quarter will be 76 down from the year before. The estimation in 21 will still be down 2/3 of what it was. And in 2021 Q2, it'll still be half of what it was the year before. And a lot of this is optimistic forecasting. So we'll see what comes to fruition, but it still is not the best picture. I did hear somebody say the other day that flat is the new up. And I think that might be the reality for many people down the road. We then went on and asked, what was the response to COVID-19? What were they doing? Well, the big news was they're adjusting their business model. Now, we said they're certainly adjusting it with the number of employees, but they're also looking at how they do business, full-time, part-time, how they reach out to consumers, their product too. One of the big things we saw is the first time we did the survey, which was in June, the biggest push was we want training on product. This had a dramatic decrease of about 11%, but an increase in designing new product. What our insight is from this is we understand what product is out there. Now we have to design the new product, which once again gives a great opportunity for destinations, hotels, and everyone else to reformulate and take a look at who their current audience is and can that be expanded. So that's exciting from that perspective too. We then said, where do you get this information? What do you do when you're coping with the crisis? Interestingly, it wasn't the governments or the DMOs. It was the travel agency associations. So once again, the industry is doing a good job for the industry. It's more about that than the DMOs, than industry friends. Curiously, we added clients this year as an option, but it was only 1 out of 4 that said that was one of their top 3 sources. So once again, the industry is supporting the industry with some help from the government. Naturally, the more the government can help, the better. This surprised us a little bit when we said, how are you communicating with your clients? What's the number one? Email, to be expected. What was not expected is the old traditional telephone, and that was making a difference. I can tell you one little story from the US. Some of the big tour operators who said when they initially called, sent an email out and said, please don't cancel your trip, just postpone it, about 40% of their consumers were agreeing to it. When they abandoned email and made phone calls and had their reservation people call the consumer and say, please stay and talk to them, that jumped up to 70 to 80%. So keep in mind, a lot of people are staying at home. They need that contact. They don't necessarily want it on an email. They want to talk to a human voice, and the telephone and even social media seems to be the channel of choice to get the best effect. We then went from B2B to B2B to C. And we said, okay, tell us about your clients and what are your clients telling you? Because that gives us an idea. Are you postponing or are you canceling? Well, as you can see across the world, there's very different responses. Well, obviously what jumps out is Australia with a lot of cancellations. And I think that, and Sarah will talk a little bit more about that, but that was based on a government shutting down an entire island continent and saying, okay, nobody's going anywhere for at least a year. So maybe it's time to cancel my trip, not just postpone it. But you see in other destinations, it was more about postponing. And interestingly, not much about changing destinations. So if I was going to one destination, there's a good chance I would go back there. I didn't need to change where I was going. Now, that could be influenced. We asked, when are you deciding? Because everybody seems to look at the booking, but sometimes not the deciding part and where my planning part is. No big surprise in the sense that almost half were waiting to decide when to travel, but no, not necessarily where to travel, when. The 21% are traveling within less than a month is based on COVID and where the rules change and where I can go and where I can't go. The Europeans are much, much more flexible than most of the other destinations in making these last minute trips, a lot of times because it's closer for them and they can make the shift very quickly. That wasn't the case necessarily all over the world. You can see here once again that the Europeans, 1 out of 3 would book something only a month in advance for these trips. A lot of times it was still international. These are all considered international, but it still could be within Europe. For the most part, people are waiting to decide. Interesting, what surprised us is the Middle East was waiting to decide for a long time, beyond a year. When we asked, what's the consideration when choosing a destination? By far, the #1 answer was a destination health and safety certification. And I cannot stress this enough. This was a clear and concise answer. They want the destination to say, it's okay to come to our destination. So notice that 3 out of 4 on their top 3 considerations was that certification. Interestingly, #2 was the management of COVID. Now, the important thing here is this is not a travel question. This is, how did the destination manage COVID? And I can say this since I'm from the US, we have done a rotten job of managing COVID. And so there's not a lot of interest. So it's all also, how did the government deal with it? And if the government dealt with it well, then I'm more apt to go to the destination. So then when it comes to marketing, this is more about storytelling and it's more about communicating, not necessarily campaigning. I think it's important to note that only 4 out of 10 picked price as a consideration. So people still want to travel. We know that pent-up demand is there. We don't mind spending the money to do it. We just want to see that there's a health certification for it and that the country has managed the pandemic well. Then we're in. We added another question about what type of travel. And we're all surprised at this, that 2 out of 3 said solo travel. Now, it could be because you've been with your partner or husband and wife for so long, you needed to get away, and that's into solo travel, but we're hearing that from more and more people. So we actually gave them a list of products and said, where is the consumer interest? And as I mentioned, 2 out of 3 said solo travel. I just talked to tour operators who are running some trips, and they literally said 1/3 of the people on coach trips were solo travel. Interestingly, senior solos. A lot of widows and widowers that were traveling on their own. They wanted to get out, they wanted to go, and they felt safe because the travel company talked about their protocols. They felt safe in that environment. As you can imagine, hotels and resorts, all inclusive. The ones that are going to have the biggest, hardest push will be ocean cruises and guided vacations, although river cruises actually came up pretty high in our ranking for a relatively small category, equal to ocean cruise. Some of our other research has indicated the smaller the cruise ship, the more comfort they're feeling on taking that trip. One of the things we've been playing with too is what we're calling a stretch season. People are not looking at the calendar like they used to, especially with homeschooling and working wherever you are remotely. People are now saying, when can I travel? It's not the same calendar parameters that we used to. So the consumer is thinking outside the calendar, if you will, and saying, would I travel at non-traditional times? And 1 out of 3 is saying yes. So it's a different way to kind of look at the product offering and looking at when you're offering it too. The other big shift we saw is that the cancellations and flexibility policies become paramount. As you see, I'm not going to go to a destination unless I see a health certification and I feel like I'm comfortable there. Once that's a given, then I still want cancellation and flexibility policies in place so I can make the changes. In some countries, it was over 50%. We then asked, what do they want from the DMOs? And I think there's some DMOs out in the audience, so this is very important. Once again, health and safety certification and timely information. What's happening? When's it going to shift? What kind of vaccine is going to be acceptable? What kind of health check is going to be acceptable or testing? That becomes more important than the marketing campaigns, although I can assure you from all these partners, they don't have the funds and they will be relying heavily on the government for a lot of marketing funds that'll go to consumers. But you see that 6 out of 10 were looking for that health certification from the DMO and that all important information. This is a big increase that'll keep forward. Now, when we say that destination certification, I want to emphasize this. It's from the actual destination. The international was not as important as the destination. Some of the things to consider are, there are things like the WTTC certification, but we're asking about the consumer. So it's one thing to talk about the trade who might be well familiar with the WTTC, but we also have to look to see what the consumer is interested in. And they think if the destination gives them confidence, they're ready to travel. The authority is obviously very important. So an SG clean with Singapore is going to be very, very important. But you have to look both from the B2B and the B2C perspective when you look at this down the road. As we look in the future and say, what's the outlook? And asked, what's going to modify, 70% of the consumers said, we have to have the ability to modify our cancellation policies and terms and conditions. This was without a doubt the biggest answer and pays off what the other questions were. And look at what's happening to insurance policies. And certain destinations, and I know Thailand just announced that you will be mandatory to have a health policy before you arrived in Thailand as an international traveler. So that's up 12% at 60%. I know once again, for example, in North America, it was 70%. We're saying we need an insurance policy for our travelers to be able to go. So flexibility, which also equates to last minute bookings, is one of the insights we take out of this survey. That will have to be something that we believe will not just be for COVID times, but will be something that the consumer and the traveler get used to doing all in all, and it'll be something that's required. We then asked, okay, you're looking at a new business model. How likely are you to consider hotels and resorts that you had not previously offered? And we were amazed that almost 90% were somewhat likely and very likely. So once again, this comes out of, I've been trained, but show me something new. I need new product. I need to package something new because maybe what I'm offering isn't good enough and the consumer is asking for something else. So I can't just push everything out. I have to have that wide range of product. And I think the other big eye opener for us, especially for destinations, were that over 50% said they're likely to contemplate destinations that they had not previously offered. So this is a blessing and a curse. The great news is that people are willing to look at destinations they've never thought of before. Where everybody was saying they wanted to go off the beaten path but never did, now they're willing to do it. That's the great news. The scary news is the destinations that thought everybody will just come back are at risk. because maybe the consumer was used to coming there, but you can see there's no loyalty to the destination. They're ready to shift and say, yep, I love this, but now I'm ready to go to here because that's what the consumer wants. And a lot of times, unfortunately, it's not the big city, it's the county, it's the country, it's the secondary and tertiary destinations. So as I said, the established destinations are going to have to work hard to keep that market, and the new destinations are going to work hard to take that opportunity of that window being open for them. The good news is within the industry, there's a lot more loyalty and people are really sticking with their suppliers. They're keeping an open mind, which is pretty par for the course, but it's not necessarily as bad as the destinations. Social media certainly got its coming time more than ever before. So what's happened is now people have embraced social media during these times. Once again, as I said before, it's important to communicate, not necessarily campaign. And that's why social media and digital activities are so important right now. And the thing to remember on social media, it's successful when it's social media. So you have to be social in that form of media, not campaigning and advertising, but being social and telling the story. It's a great time to tell stories, not just about travel, but what the destination's doing to deal with COVID too. We then asked us once again about the changing roles and said, how do you look at it? And when we compared our question in June, the emphasis was on health and being advisors and safety. That was the role of that middleman, that person in there who's doing the B2B work and saying, this is what we have to do with our clients. If you look forward 6 months, it changes to change and flexibility. So health factors are a given, then it becomes all about flexibility and change. Interestingly, if you look at all those needs from the consumer, it could be the same needs for a psychologist. Somebody who's got to work with health and advising and talking about change and flexibility. And I think most travel advisors sometimes feel like they are psychologists or psychiatrists right now in the field of travel. And with that, I thank you for allowing us to share some of this information. And I love giving it over to my counterparts who can give more details in their respective markets. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Alan. Thanks for this presentation, very insightful. And I will now hand it over to Kwok Wongan for the panel discussion. He will also let Sarah and Reen introduce themselves briefly before. Okay.
Thank you very much, Phil. Yes, so before we get to the panel discussion, I just want to remind everyone also, please send your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And let's hear about the respective markets. First, we'll hear more about China, or Asia, particularly China, from Reen from Brand Story. So Reen, I'll pass this over to you to give a quick 3-minute presentation.
Sounds good. Thank you, Pata, for having me. Yeah, we will be sharing the the China survey details. So it's a deck that looks really much like the ones from L. So so I have prepared another deck to just summarize everything for you. Let me see. I'm trying to operate the slides. So, this is a very quick summary of the situation in China. And overall, the sentiments in China is very different from other parts of the world. So much so, like the pandemic is really well controlled. During the recent National Day holidays, we see over 600 million domestic trips successfully made. I wanted to highlight this for 2 reasons. Firstly, people feel safe enough to travel, which goes to show that the pandemic is under control. Second, how do we get to this stage where 600 million trips are made? Just a recap, when did the rest of the world start shutting down the borders? For China, the borders were closed since January 2020. Much earlier than the rest of the world. So it is not a choice, but a government directive to suspend all outbound travel. So as you can see, China started earlier, in this whole COVID situation, and naturally bring it under control. We now experience recovery sooner. And this journey to recovery, I take this opportunity to share that it's not easy. It took many months before theme parks and attractions start reopening. It was a very gradual process. So, started with 30% capacity, then 50%, and then now 100%. Now we are seeing year on year, hotel occupancy is up by 3% and their daily rates up by 10%. We have to remember that, it is a strict government directive, and travelers have no choice, but they could not travel. So even now, when there are some border reopenings, I think as I last checked, over 25 countries have already opened their borders to China. But, the Chinese travelers are still holding back. They are not traveling, even though they are exempt from quarantine upon arrival. So what is the deterrent? The largest, deterrent is actually any entry back into China will require a mandatory quarantine, in a dedicated facility. So here we are not talking about isolation at home, but it's a separate dedicated facility for 14 days. Again, for here, I'm referring to leisure travel. Yeah, so there are already many countries with now reciprocal green lane business travel arrangement with China. So for green lanes, there is no quarantine again, and upon the negative PCR test, of the travelers. Next, I think Al spoke a great deal about the health and safety certification. This is really very important to Chinese travelers. They want to feel that the place that they are traveling to, the safety, aspect, is taken care of well in the destination. So, however, there are recent setbacks, we have heard, there is a postponement of the travel bubble between Singapore and Hong Kong due to a resurgence of the COVID-19 cases. Also, there's sporadic, small cases, happening in China, for example, in Xinjiang, Dalian, Tianjin, also very recently in Inner Mongolia. So there was a case of 2 cases were identified, but then, it led to 3 million people being tested. Yeah, so this is the current situation. So for the Chinese, right now, they are thinking that, the safest place to be, it will be in China. And China has actually gone many steps further in the safety certification. So here, what we see here is a personal health safety certification that is on mobile phones. So I think everyone here is probably, you are familiar with Alipay or WeChat, and this health code is easily available through these super apps. Yeah. So if you have a green, QR code, it means it's very safe. Okay, the red is, is very risky, and then yellow means that this individual is actually under a 14-day quarantine. Okay, so This is an app that monitors the health status of Chinese people. And if there's any risk of an infection, we will need to go for testing. So this is something required before you enter any building. Yeah, so that goes to explain why domestic travel confidence has resumed, and now is very active in China. Yeah, so yeah, I'm very happy to take more questions, about the travel trade and also the consumer landscape later on. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Reen. Now let's switch gears and take a look down under. So now I'll pass this over to Sarah from GTI. Sarah, give us an update on your perspective region.
Thank you very much, Paul. And I'm just going to share my screen with you all, but I think I need Reen to end her screen share. So just in a moment, I'll be able to share my screen with you.
I think that's my colleagues back in here. Yeah, can you stop sharing?
So just while we're working out the technology, I'll just start by introducing myself. So GTI is the Australian and New Zealand arm of the Travel Consul network. So GTI is in Australia and New Zealand. We've got offices across Auckland, Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane, and we have 25 in the team at GTI. So it looks like I've got control of the screen now, and I'll be able to tell you a little bit more about the Australian traveller. And to understand the Australian traveller post-COVID, I think it's important just to understand the pre-COVID Australian traveller. So in 2019, there was 11 million Australians that travelled abroad, and we spent $65 billion in that year on overseas travel. So that makes Australians the 5th highest spenders in the world for travel product. We're also long stayers and have ever increasing travel intent. So we've seen year by year, there's more and more Australians that are wanting to travel overseas. The current situation in Australia, our government here clamped down very strongly in March to introduce lockdowns. So Australians have had hard and strict border closures. So we haven't been able to travel overseas since March. And also there's restrictions in terms of the inbound visitation. So currently inbound, we have a cap of 3,000 people that can arrive into Australia each week. And that is Australians generally returning. And they're then asked to go into or required to go into a 2-week quarantine. So the government's working on a gradual opening with safe travel corridors between countries that have also successfully managed COVID. We saw yesterday that Qantas announced they were planning to use the IATA Travel Pass, which is a similar iPhone or similar phone application, which would show if people have had their vaccination for COVID when that's introduced next year. And if they've had vaccination, they'll be able to travel. The Australian economy is recovering really well. So our employment rates are lower than expected. So in June, we had unemployment of around 7.5%. And in October, it's at 6.8%, which is a much better number than we expected. The economy also grew in September, so officially ending our short recession that was brought on by COVID. And the Australian Reserve Bank Governor is predicting a rapid rebound. So we're expecting that our economy is going to be very strong next year. So Australians will have money to travel. There's also a very high intent to travel in 2021. So our leading newspapers, the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, asked their readers how open they were to travel in 2021. And we've seen very encouraging responses. So we had 46% say that they were extremely open to travel, 27% that were very open to travel next year, 24% that were somewhat open to travel, and only 3% who were not interested in traveling next year. You can see here the list of destinations that are popular for Australians outbound. And the key thing that we're seeing post-COVID is that this destination list is changing. So the Australian consumer is really open to new destinations, and we're going to see significant change. Certainly and unfortunately, for those USA destinations. The USA is going to be well down this travel list in 2021, and we'll see that countries that are considered COVID safe will rise to the top. So pre-COVID travel trends for Australia are remaining throughout. So Australians still want to travel in a natural setting. They seek authentic experiences. They like perceived value for money and look for ways that they can enjoy luxury and also personal enrichment. But we're also seeing some trends that COVID has accelerated. So outdoor and nature-based travel, health and wellness, and also slow and independent travel. Booking.com released a report, their Future Travel Trends report, and almost half, so 46% of travellers prefer to avoid public transportation, such as trains. So we're going to see 2021 for Australian travellers be the year of the road trip. Australians have always liked taking a road trip, but next year that will be certainly the case in overseas destinations as well, if that's possible. COVID's also giving rise to new trends. So safety, flexibility, and trust is key. And from Al's presentation earlier, we saw that that is really important. Destinations having that either certification or communicating about the measures that they're taking in regard to COVID safety, that is now one of the key concerns for the Australian market. We also have seen media consolidation, a huge rise in social media, and a move to digital. A lot of people that I speak with overseas can't believe just how much Australians use social media. So we've got some stats here that the average Australian, so that's counting anyone who's 18 years old or above, on average, they are on YouTube for 10.5 hours a week. They're on Facebook for 10 hours a week and Instagram for 9 hours a week. And we've just seen increased media use for COVID. So that's just a few quick trends on the Australian market. And I look forward to chatting with Paul and our other panelists more. So thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And welcome back, Alan. So let's just jump right into the panel discussion. I'll just remind everyone here, if you have any questions about their presentations, feel free to drop them in the Q&A just below. Please don't send them in the chat because I am not monitoring that. I'm only monitoring the Q&A function. So if you put any questions to the chat, I will not see it. So I think Sarah talked a little bit about some of the changing sort of emerging trends, especially when we talk about travel and media consumption trends. But you know, I want to ask Reen about what about from the China market? What's sort of the changes to the consumer landscape, the emerging travel and media consumption trends in China, and then sort of start with you, and then maybe talk to Al about maybe on the U.S. perspective. You're still on mute.
The pandemic, right, has put everyone has turned our lives like topsy-turvy. Yeah. So you know, the major trends I think it's reported worldwide is how people are going to digital. But for China, even prior to the pandemic, it is already very social and digital driven. Yeah. So I just wanted to share that, you know, during the pandemic, people basically watch hours of, you know, movies online, play games, you know, and kept up with the interaction, although not face to face. Everything has gone online, including education has gone online in a big way. So, you know, that is something to tap into when you are doing a campaign or when you're promoting your products to the Chinese market. Another area, for example, medical consultation went virtual. So because people want to avoid the risk of any infection and so on. Yeah, so major changes to lives. Yeah.
But then, you know, Al had talked a bit about, you know, solo travel is the big thing, and Sarah talked about, you know, outdoor nature-based health and wellness. Is it the same thing in China? I mean, because, you know, you said domestic travel is big. Is it the same case, or is in China, is it more just same as pre-COVID? Has that changed in any way?
Yes, things have changed. As you, I think a lot of you would recall that, you know, China's MICE groups are huge, you know, and they can come in thousands. And, you know, there was like a seems like a world, another world, because right now groups are going to be much smaller. Why? Because I think that people trust like a more controlled itineraries, yeah, and places that can be easily traced. Because people want to, now when they travel, they want to be with people that they know and also traveling in the same transport. So I wanted to share these observations. And the younger set of travelers, they are more adventurous and they are looking for more self-drive itineraries, road trips. Yeah, and also, yes, solo travel. Also, we see a increase in that. I think just people want to get away from it all. Yeah, and however, when they travel, they are looking at ways to reduce their exposure to strangers, and also to public transportation. So these are important changes taking place. Yeah.
So similar to what Sarah had mentioned,
Quite similar.
outdoor nature, solo, health and wellness. But Al, from your perspective, I guess from the Americans' perspective, is it the same? Are these trends also happening in the U.S. as well, with sort of domestic travel there, both travel trends and media consumption trends as well?
Sure, I think on a few different areas. So first, the domestic travel is probably what saved the United States right now, but it's certainly not the revenue generator that the international travel usually brings. I think the best comparison is, on an airplane, only about 15% of the seats are business class, but it usually accounts for 55 to 60% of the profit from the airline. I think if there's a parallel with domestic travel and international traveler, the domestic traveler, when they travel, does not spend as much money per day, per hotel room, per activity as the international traveler does. So even though the mechanics are still moving, the profit's not there. And with the waves of shutting down and opening up and shutting down, it's hard for them to make money. So I think we'll see a shift in that. But I do think in the US and in other countries, this has forced people to open and look domestically at what products are being offered. And I think a lot of times they're pleasantly surprised at the level of product that's being offered too. So that's an encouragement for the long term. And I think the third element that falls into place is, as I mentioned, people always talked about going off the beaten path. Now they are. They don't necessarily want to go to the cities. And in the long term, that'll be a good element for disbursement of travel and not be concentrated in other cities. When it comes to media, I think we're all in the same. There's been a trend to digital media. That's going to continue. From the marketing and advertising side, that's going to make it harder for you to compete out in the marketplace. To meet the content that you put out is going to have to be smarter. It's going to have to be more creative, and it has to be consistent. I'm worried about hotels, destinations who are waiting until things open and then rush in to try to talk to the consumer, where they have to be telling the story all along, because where the decision might be made late, the consideration is made early. And so you have to be with them. And when you look at how you're getting across this content, one of my favorite expressions is, the smaller the screen, the bigger the distraction. When we have them in the movie theater, we have them 100%. When we have them on the TV, there's distractions. And when we have them on the phone, we're competing with 100 other things besides the other ads and everything else that they're looking at. So it really pushes everybody and challenges them to be smarter in how they're marketing and more consistent with how many touch points they have in the marketplace.
So then like, what are the opportunities and considerations for business that would want to seek a share of I guess, the American market? And then we'll ask Sarah about the Australian market, and of course, Reem for the China market. But so we'll start back to Al. So what is that opportunity and considerations that a business should consider?
Well, I think the first thing that should consider is the first people who will visit your destination are actually probably people who've been there before because they have a comfort level and they want to come back. This also says this is the easiest way to you to market if you've got that database of people that you need to reach. So I think that's the first thing to look at. The second is it's more the intrepid traveler. It's more the person who's going to be a little more adventurous is the second one to look at and try to target those people as a primary way to get the market back. And then, as I said, it's got to be storytelling, something we've been talking about for a long time. It's even more prevalent now. And it doesn't always have to be stories about your hotel. It has to be stories about the activities. I'll just make one little comment and I'll turn it over to Sarah and Reen, because I think there's a lot of hotels here too, and we've talked about this. It is so important for the hotels to do two things. First of all, don't discount your hotel rooms. Give a value proposition. Don't take your $200 a night hotel and offer it for $600 a night. You're not going to get the people you want at the hotel, and it's going to take you years for your prices to come back. And the second, you're better off saying, my $200 hotel, I'll give you 5 nights for paying for 2 nights. That keeps your rate and keeps somebody there for 5 nights to eat more and do more. And the second thing I'd emphasize is work with your local product. If you're in Bangkok, the hotels and operators need to find the night tuk-tuk tours. They need to find the cooking schools. They need to find the puppet theaters, and they need to include that in their package. They need to support the local players, because without them, people won't be coming to Bangkok for 5 nights. They'll be coming for 1 night or 2 nights. And so if I'd almost like to change the phrase of sharing economy is to sharing those consumers who there'll be few of them. We need to get them for longer stays, and there has to be the wide range of product. So I think those are some of the considerations when you go out to market is what are we actually putting out to market?
So, yeah.
Well, let's go over to Sarah first. What about, for people that want to get a share of the Australian market, what sort of the opportunities and considerations they should consider for their business?
Sure. This post-COVID environment is the biggest opportunity that destinations and hotels and other tour operators have in the Australian market. The Australian market has always been very controlled by our trade. So we have a duopoly here in terms of travel retailers, Flight Centre and Hello World. And we're seeing more direct booking trends in the Australian market. But post-COVID, we're expecting that 60% of travel agencies will remain. So that is, more than 1,500 shop fronts in Australia. And from our Travel Consul research, we've seen that 53% of those supply chain partners are considering new product. So this is the best opportunity to really push aside that traditional product that got purchased in Australia and really put your product or your destination front and center. So the opportunities to do that are twofold, really. One is to ensure that those key wholesalers and retail agencies are contracting product, making sure that those travel agency networks are trained to sell it. And then also direct consumer. We know that, as I mentioned before, social media and digital is the number one and two channels that are being used by consumers to research and plan their holiday. So everyone really needs to be developing that great content, as Al mentioned, and distributing that digitally. So there's no better time than now for products that haven't sold well in Australia to take advantage of this opportunity.
All right. And Reen, you want to add something to that?
Yes, yeah. So I think what Al said, right? So very, I think for our hotel partners, yeah, out there, yeah. So we are looking at higher end, actually, all-inclusive experiences. So I think that there's an opportunity here where you want people to stay longer. And here, what people are looking for is that you should promote your properties like it's a destination on its own. Yeah, because people are trying to reduce, right, the going out, reduce any risk of COVID and so on. But if they're traveling, maybe they are with partners and they still want a very enjoyable experience. So here, I think any demonstration of sensitivity to the health and wellness of your travelers I think all these are very good, to value to add to your packages. Yeah, and also the small like a curated a sense of adventure that you can provide a sense of the local environment. Can add on experiences and beef up the whole property hotel experience. Okay, and yeah, I saw a question on mountaineering. Yes, definitely, we are interested in that for the more adventure-seeking, nature-seeking sort. I think nature, there's a good opportunity there. Another one, although I wanted to be cautious about highlighting that, but I think that we should be prepared for the revival of technical visits, MICE, from China, because that if you remember, that was how travel in China started once upon a time. Yeah, so here, you must have a very valid reason to travel abroad, and incentives will become a big deal again. So I think it's good to monitor the market and then be prepared for these opportunities coming up.
All right. All right.
Hey, can I just add to what Reen said? I love her comment about the destination, the resort or the hotel becomes the destination, and that shows the safety. In a recent study, why people were going to Airbnb, the number one reason they said was price, but a very close number two reason was I get to experience local activities that my host is telling me about. And I think it's an area where the hotels have missed. And now's the opportunity for them to take advantage of this and to say, oh, we can offer almost the same thing as the Airbnb. We can offer all these different activities, and they're pre-screened, and I don't have to go on public transportation because the hotel's going to do everything. And as we know, there'll be fewer people, so we have to focus on length of stay. And the governments, I think, are starting to look and say, if we want a 10% increase, is it for us getting 10% more people, or is it getting people to stay instead of 4 days, 5 days, and take that as the percentage increase and be more involved in the spend than necessarily the number of people?
Yeah, there's a common thread that you guys all said too, that this idea of working, the partnership's a big thing. Sarah had mentioned, make sure to work with your distribution partners. Reen and Alan both, work with the other sort of your other partners in destination, whether it's your hotel, you're working with your tuk-tuk drivers or your other tours. So it's a very important theme, and then working with a destination. Some of that part of that we really try to stress too, that nobody can do it alone, especially to recover after this unprecedented situation. But I do want to make sure we get to some of the questions, because we have a lot of questions here. So I'm going to drop down to this, the most recent one. This is for Sarah, but I guess any of you guys can answer it. Because I know Alan had actually said this in the presentation, that the safety certification was people more sort of tuned to the ones if it was from the DMO. But do you think countries should standardize the SOPs or that safety certification to avoid confusion for travelers?
I think what the consumer is interested in is communication around what destinations are doing. I think that standardization of safety certification would be an absolute dream, but I'm not sure that it's going to be realistically achieved by all of those destinations. So I think that what we should be aiming for is for each country and each product within that country to clearly communicate the measures that they're taking to be COVID safe. And I think that consumers would respond well to that.
It brings up an interesting point too, that I think there's going to be a shift to more mono destination trips, where people might have gone, say in Southeast Asia, to 3 different countries. Now they don't want all that movement. And so that goes back to the idea of length of stay too. So once they come in, they know that country has the destination, that certification. They'll stay in that country for 12 or 14 days rather than doing Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam. They'll pick one and stay the majority of the time there. So once again, it's a great opportunity for partnership with everybody involved.
Yeah, but I assume that if you're doing some multi-destinations, then most people would then use a travel advisor or a travel agent to be able to help them sort of get through those, those different protocols of each country instead of doing it sort of yourself, right? But we'll stick with the safety certification because Chandra actually brought a really good question here. It's a simple term, but it's not easy for a lot of developing nations. So how do you suggest sort of a proactive action for an SME or a less developed nation?
I can jump in if no one else wants to. Irene, you'd like to take that question?
I think that, probably like if you follow the, China market, it probably has the strictest, measures. So I just wanted to share that during the pandemic, for example, if you are buying groceries, the groceries will be distributed not to your doorstep in order to avoid any contact. It's distributed to a community point, and at that point, only authorized members from your household are allowed to go and collect the grocery. So I would say then with the health QR code that turns color, so that, travelers can be easily, rapid tracing is key, to ring fence, any issue, before an outbreak can happen. So these measures are probably the extreme. So, I think that, countries are starting because as they reopen, they studying all these measures and they will probably adopt, the good points, and from this experience,
Al, you had something to add or no?
No, I think Reen's right on. I do think the developing nations have an opportunity now too. I think because a lot of them are based on outdoor activities, that they've put themselves in a great position to compete against some of the big cities, and that people don't necessarily want to go to the big cities. They want to see other things that are happening, and they want to go to other places. So Kazakhstan or someplace like that actually has a lot of opportunity because the numbers are low and people will feel comfortable. They can probably do private touring. The destinations just have to be creative in getting out there, and they need to get out there in the marketplace as much as they can with great stories.
Yeah, that's actually at least a question from Kadir, I guess. How can small destinations like Bangladesh come back? What should their social media plan be? But actually, I had a question myself too, because you mentioned about storytelling and this idea of this idea of yes, you need to have your health and safety out there, but how do you balance that? You don't want to push too much health and safety messaging. So what is that balance? So I guess there's 2 points to that question. What is that social media plan, and how is that story? Sarah, you're nodding, so looks like you have
Sure. I think social media, in terms of what the plan is, it's generating great content. So what we recommend in Australia and New Zealand is having separate strategies for Facebook and Instagram. They're the 2 key channels that we have here. And within those channels, there's different ways to use them, but we're finding stories is really effective. So creating video content, short, cut down 60-second videos are really the type of content that's performing well for our clients. And we can generate that in really low-cost ways. So taking user-generated content and making those videos sometimes out of stills, we can work with destinations on very slim budgets to create some fantastic high-quality content that can be distributed on those channels.
On our end, I think that the social media channels differ greatly, right? So you have the WeChat, Weibo, and there are many different apps. So I wanted to share that I think that most international attractions and hotels are already on the WeChat or Weibo. However, the COVID measures are many and is changing all the time. So actually the forum format of a Q&A, like what we're doing now, is probably the best format, And for that, you go to a app, called Zhihu. So it's another, application. So I think depending, maybe if you are operating a cruise and all that, that's totally essential for you to now start this social media channel to communicate. Yeah.
Noni mentioned TikTok.
TikTok, yeah, okay. That is important too. You want people to be happier. Yeah.
Alan?
And I think, yeah, just two quick thoughts. One, to emphasize what Sarah and Reen had said, in the sense that, one of the flaws we see is somebody saying, oh, we've got this great content, put it on all the social media. And every social media needs its own content because its own different vehicle, and you can't just use it for, oh, let's use it on Facebook and zip TikTok and everything else too. I think the other thing is, because people are concerned with safety, you can be very creative in how you present creativity in the destination without saying we're safe. I saw a great video of Japan where they're projecting rings around people with fish within the ring as you're walking. So if you bump into somebody else's ring, all the fish go out. And so now that's a creative, fun story that will get picked up. It's great graphic, it's all that, but it says safety without saying safety. And it says, if I travel there, I'm going to be safe. The worst thing you could do is say, our country is safe. That's the worst. Show the creativity. I'm in Los Angeles, we've gone to so much outdoor dining, and they're taking over parking lots, but instead of just putting people out in a parking lot, they'll fill the parking lot with sand to make it look more like a beach setting. They'll do creative things. They'll put people in trees and they'll feel like they're on their own. There's 100 different creative ideas that really say, this is fun, this is creative, this is a place I want to experience, and it's obviously safe without saying it's safe.
So yeah, I also wanted to share that, for the China market, I think that it is a lot of work, I would say, to run the social stories, every day, to be in, 24/7, So I think it's essential to partner, to put together, partners, so that you can do it together. And, it's a much more powerful story and voice. Yeah. Also, not to forget, right, there are actually already many user-generated content that you may have overlooked. It's out in the China market. There's a happy traveler who has written about you, and all this. How to aggregate these type of content to help with your story. Yeah. So yeah.
I'll just try to do one more question, and then we just wrap up here. So I got this. I guess just last question here is. Sorry, I'll go to the social media question. I mean, it's a chance of information overload to the audience. So what would you say about that if there's too much social media? I mean, or are you diversifying it across other media channels, whether it's whether it's newspaper media or TV? Should that also not be forgotten as well?
I think we're seeing in consumer trends that there seems to be an unlimited capacity for consuming information and media. So the rising stats that we're seeing on media consumption, obviously social media and digital, but in Australia, people are still consuming TV, radio, and a whole range of other media. So I don't think that that's really a challenge. Certainly in this market, people are consuming with more gusto than they ever have before. And we're seeing that in the millennials and other generations coming through, that seems to only be increasing.
I mean, I think from the US, we've gotten it so integrated. We know that you've driven your car past 10 billboards, so we know we can reach you on your radio and then your TV at home. I mean, I think the interesting thing is, as Sarah mentioned with the millennials, the question is, are they looking at 2 or 3 different mediums quite often at the same time? So I think there's no shortage of being able to reach those people. And there was a recent study that fascinated me, in that if you use the same media to reach somebody, no matter how many touch points you have with that media, it's 40% effective. If you add a second medium, it goes to 50% effective. A third medium goes to 55. So the more different mediums that you can reach that person, the better. And the only analogy I can make, it's like a boxer. If all he does is hit you in the shoulder, he'll never win the fight. But if he hits you in the shoulder, in the stomach, et cetera, if he hits you enough body shots, then he can knock you out. I think that's a parallel to how media can effectively work if you use all the channels to actually reach that consumer.
I think what Reen, you can feel free to add.
I think the kind of traditional way of looking at communications, we always think of it like it's like very from awareness, and you generate interest, and then evaluation, and then you purchase. So right now, this model has totally been disrupted, and it's been accelerated by the pandemic. So what you are seeing is that your consumers, they are encountering you at any stage. They could just have consumed something that make them interested. They were not aware of you, and they can come to any social media and encounter you. And then they evaluate later on, and they can hear from a friend, and so on and so forth. So it's very dynamic. This process is no longer like a cast in stone, and also it's very essential to be present in many platforms, especially travel. So people love travel content, and it is part of your lifestyle to look at great outdoor spaces and all that. So you have to take all this opportunity to engage the audience.
Seriously,
one more quick comment, from the old man in the room. There's an old expression, and it still applies with all the media that we have today, which is, I know half my advertising is working, I just don't know which half. which means you still have to do all of it to be effective.
Smart words, good saying. But just for everyone who's asking, is the report available? The one that you presented at the beginning, is it available, and where is it available at? Yes,
if you go to the Travel Consul website, and I can send you the link, Paul, to distribute for your team, but it's literally travelconsul.com, right there, travelconsul.com. And you go to the blog section, and there's an article with the link for all the information, and it's completely free. And then if you want more information about a specific market, you can reach out to each one of the members, and they can give you that information. So if you're more interested in China, then you can go right to Reen, you can go right to Sarah and get that specific market information, or from the US, whatever you need, it's available for you through the Travel Consul website.
Fantastic. Well, we're way over time here, but thank you. I believe we could probably have this conversation for a couple more hours. I love this subject as well. So thank you so much to Sarah, Reen, and Alan. And I'll pass this back to my colleague just across the way from me, Room. You wanna wrap this up about what we have next in store?
Yes. Thanks again, everyone, for joining the panel discussion and the interesting content. Yes, so first of all, everyone who's listening to this, you will get a recording of this webinar. So look out for the email. And then all the recordings can also be found on our YouTube channel at PATA TV. And since we're short of time, I'm just cutting down here, and I will announce the upcoming webinars that we have. So we do have a webinar on December 3rd, which is a PATA 101, focusing on membership benefits, as well as a meet and greet with our CEO, Dr. Mario Hardy. So register for that one. You can submit questions, and he will answer professional questions, maybe some private questions, we don't know. So yeah. And then the second one is going to be a hybrid event that we have on December 7th. It's the Asia Pacific Tourism Recovery Trends and Outlook. That's a long title. It will start around 3:30. You can register on our website. My colleague is also sharing the links in the chat box for you, so you can register directly for those events. And then the last but not least is on December 15th, another PATA Spotlight with our member Embed, which is going to be focusing on hygiene. So you can also register for that. All details, as I said, are on the website if you're interested to look into any of them. We hope to see you at the upcoming webinar soon. So yes, with that, I would say, so on the screen you see our details. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the team at membership@pada.org. If you have questions to any of the panelists, speakers, you can send them to this address. We're happy to forward it. And with that, I would say thank you to everyone. Thank you, Alan, Reen, Sarah. Thank you, Paul, for moderating the session. And yes, see you soon. Have a nice evening, morning, day, wherever you are. And bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.